Welcome back to The Language Sofa, the podcast where we sit down with the most inspiring voices in language education and dig into the ideas, stories and the classroom magic that makes languages come alive. Today, I'm genuinely excited and honestly a little bit honoured to welcome someone who has shaped so much of how I teach and how I think and even talk about language learning. That's Dylan Viñales. Dylan has worked closely with Gianfranco Conti, a driving force behind the EPI approach, and a teacher whose clarity and generosity has helped thousands of MFL practitioners and is truly a global educator. From the UK to Spain to Malaysia, Dylan has taken his passion for languages across continents, adapting to different cultures, classrooms and expectations, and still finding ways to make language learning meaningful, accessible and joyful. In this conversation, we talk about his journey as a teacher, what led him to teach in Malaysia, and the differences between teaching in Malaysia to different places around the world. Also talking about the evolution of EPI, managing different misconceptions, and also how to build real proficiency. So whether you're a seasoned sentence builder fan, an MFL teacher curious about EPI, or someone who just loves languages, you're going to find so much value in this episode. So, grab a coffee, settle into your sofa, and let's dive in to an inspiring conversation with Dylan Viñales. Okay, so welcome to the sofa, Dylan.
Hey, thank you, Ben. Delighted to be here.
No, that's brilliant. So it's great to have you on the sofa. We've been planning this for a little while, and it's hard to coordinate our time zones, as we were saying. You being in Malaysia, me being in sunny Essex. But we've got there. We got there in the end.
Yeah, I know it wasn't easy, but yeah, like I said, really excited to finally do a podcast with you. Been meaning to do it for weeks or months.
That's
actually.
Great. No, so like I always ask people at the start of these sessions, I find really interesting to find out what your journey has been into languages and language teaching. So what first sparked your kind of passion or your interest in language learning?
I've been interested in languages since a very early age. So I grew up in Gibraltar. I grew up speaking English and Spanish in a very bilingual environment. And then I studied French as well at school and then later at university. And I was always passionate about languages, and I always loved the fact that through language you can really break barriers and communicate with people, and you can make lots of connections. And that's something which I've kind of kept with me throughout my whole life. So I was always a big fan of languages, and I loved the excitement of learning new languages and speaking to people. And then that sort of translated into teaching as well. So after my degree, which was in Edinburgh, Heriot-Watt, in translating and interpreting, I took a year out, and in that year I was doing some journalism. I was writing a few articles for a local paper back in Gibraltar, and I was also doing some translation work, some freelance translation. But I was also, on the side, I was also doing a little bit of teaching, just guitar lessons. I was teaching this little kid guitar lessons, and that really was this breakthrough moment where this child who I was teaching guitar had been so cripplingly shy that he wouldn't even practice the guitar in front of his own mum. The mum would say, "I don't know if he's been practicing or not because he's too shy. He hides the guitar when I come in the room." And after a few months of teaching this child, I went to his house one day, and the mum came out and she was really excited, and she said, "You'll never believe what happened. Today at school, the teacher came to me, and the music teacher, and she said that my child Paul had come to the front of the class, and he'd offered to play a song in front of the class, and he'd played this classical piece in front of the class, and he's got big applause." And that was a real, hair standing on end moment. I thought, this child who's so shy has managed to overcome that just by some kind of impact that I've had. And that partly inspired me to then go and do a PGC at the end of the year and get into teaching. And after that, kind of the rest is history. It really clicked for me.
That's amazing. So it's interesting. I find the the varied experiences that actually lead people into teaching. And you're one, we've got a lot in common. I play guitar as well, so there we go.
Nice.
But it's those kind of moments where you go, oh, I've actually impacted someone. I've made a difference to someone, and it might not necessarily be in the classroom setting. It's something different sometimes, isn't it? You go, oh, actually, this is some people quite enjoy that contribution to feeling like they're contributing to something bigger, I think.
I think so. I think as a teacher, there's obviously we're languages teachers, so that's the majority of what we do. But sometimes even as a form tutor, just being there for your students and having a student who's having a hard time and just being there and listening to them and knowing that also can make a difference. It's really powerful.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I often say to people, that's something I find I didn't realise I would love about teaching is the kind of the pastoral element, or the bit of being a form tutor or being that kind of go-to person for someone. You think, oh, I love languages, I'm going in to teach languages, but that's actually a massive thing as well. I think it's something that people don't realise how much you are impacting these people's lives, but not from having a big ego perspective, but you are sometimes that person for them. Their family life might be quite disjointed and things like that, and you actually do become that person for them. So for sure.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I was having a chat. I was actually at a workshop about coaching conversations and one-to-ones just last Friday, and we're talking about different ways to coach students and different ways to help them to arrive at their own solutions and answers. But also something that I took away was sometimes there isn't actually a real solution if they've got something happening at home that doesn't really have a solution. Just the fact that you can be there and just really kind of actively listen to them is actually enough to make a difference.
Exactly. No, for sure. So, look, in terms of going back to languages, obviously, that's what we're both really into.
Yes. Sorry.
What would you say were there any key moments or things that influenced your approach to language teaching along the way?
So I met Gianfranco 11 years ago when I first moved to Malaysia. And we had so many formative conversations. It was the real early days of EPI, but Gianfranco really influenced me at a really 11 years ago. He influenced me while EPI was still kind of growing and evolving into building fluency through chunks, the notions of comprehensible input, trying to build self-efficacy as goals. So that would be my main obviously inspiration and my main influence in the last 10, 11 years.
No, it's understandable. I get it. I had this sort of similar thing early on in my career with in teaching. It just made sense to me. It made sense to the approach, but that's fascinating. So, what led you to your move to Malaysia, and what appealed to you about teaching there? How did that come about?
Well, I taught in Bath, first of all, for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then while I was in Bath, everything was going very well. I was really enjoying what I was doing. And I really loved where I was working. I worked at a school called King Edward's in Bath. Right. Up the University Hill, and it was a fantastic place to work with lovely students, really motivated, lovely colleagues, and also Bath itself is a fantastic city. Mm-hmm. And I had just got to the point where I had accepted that I was going to stay in Bath for the long term. I was just, right. I always, for many years, I thought next year I might move somewhere else, and then one year I accepted that I was just going to stay in Bath and just settle down. Mm-hmm. And that was the same year that I was part of a tragic incident. I was out cycling in Bath one evening with a friend of mine called Christopher Douglas Brown. Mm-hmm. And on the way back home, the sun was starting to set. We got a bit caught out by the timing. And sadly, my friend Chris was hit by a car as we were cycling back in. So he lost his life as a result of that accident, and I was there when it happened, the accident, and he was transferred to the hospital, and he survived for a couple more days. So I know it sounds not relevant to language teaching per se, but it was that incident that led me to really think, you know what, I need to get out and see the world, because my friend Chris had been a very adventurous, very open-minded, adventurous type. He would have wanted to travel the world. So that led me to apply to jobs. I went 1 month from being, I'm going to settle down in Bath. It's fantastic here and I love it. And then within a month, I thought, no, I need to get out. So I applied for jobs I remember I applied for one job in Moscow, one somewhere in the Bahamas, and another one in Beijing. So just
a good variety of places.
Casting the net far and wide, just anything relevant and interesting and exciting. And I was offered a job in Beijing at Harrow International School in Beijing as a head of languages. So I found myself within a year moving out to Beijing, and that was the start of a big adventure. So I taught in Beijing for 4 years. That's where I met my wife, Natasha. And we got married in Beijing. We had our daughter, our eldest child, there. And after 4 years of living in Beijing, we decided it was time to move on. And the reason really was to do more with climate than anything else. Beijing has got what I would describe, in my own opinion, as a hostile climate, comprising of a extremely hot summer, which lasts for 5 months, and then a extremely cold winter. It drops down to about minus 15 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And it stays down at minus 15. I've seen it get down to minus 20, but it does that for 5 months straight, solid 5 months of minus 15. And for someone, for a Mediterranean person like myself, it's not what you want. So we made a move to Malaysia. A lot of our friends had moved from Beijing to Kuala Lumpur, and everyone that moves out here all said that they were very happy here and that it was a really ideal place to raise a young family. So we followed out. We followed out to Malaysia, and in terms of living, just your day-to-day life, it's a fantastic place to live because it's summer all year round and the people are super friendly and the food's amazing. But also in terms of working, where I work now is a absolutely fantastic place to work in terms of the colleagues that I work with, and also the school itself is well resourced, the management is very strong, and the students, I save the best to last. The students are really fantastic, really engaged, really passionate.
I mean, I've seen some of the videos that you've posted, and the students just look so engaged in what you're doing. They're completely captivated by it. Obviously, that's because of your influence as well, but that they do seem like, they have that sort of work ethic and that sort of willingness to learn and humility, I suppose. They seem like, from what I can see from those short clips,
for sure.
Stuff,
they're highly engaged.
That vibe.
They work really hard, and also it's an international school that I work at, and there's 50 plus nationalities in the mix. In any given class, you've got 6, 7, 8 different. Sorry for the 6, 7. You got any number of different nationalities mixed in. So, and that itself just creates a big willingness to learn languages. Because I'm very glad to say that in my own context, I never hear anyone say, "Well, why would learning languages be useful?" Or no one questions the why. And that's a big barrier that's already removed.
Yeah. No, that is a massive thing. I find that here a lot, because sometimes within the communities we teach in here, there is a bit of the why. Why do I need to be doing this? What is my reasoning? Which obviously is a massive initial challenge, because unless you know the why to learning something, quite often you're not going to engage with it. You're not going to connect to it.
Yeah, of course.
And if that's
I remember
I had a massive thing.
Yeah, I had a similar experience even working in Bath. Most of the students were really engaged and really into it, but you would get occasionally students saying, "You know what, I don't think I'm going to need this later on." So questioning that why.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's what I was going to say about would you say that's one of the main differences between teaching in the UK or in Beijing to where you are now, is the openness? I guess being in an international school, that might be a relevant thing anywhere, but the having already if they already have a language background and an openness to that, and understanding that there are other languages, there are different cultures. That's
for sure. Like obviously, like we have different challenges that we face at school, such as students coming to school with maybe a lower initial level of English because they've got other home languages that are strong. But yeah, for sure, that's one of the main differences is the fact that the students here are just consistently very internationally minded and motivated to learn.
Absolutely. And so within that, so obviously working in such different contexts, do you find you've had to adapt to different cultural norms and different cultural contexts within not only where you're working, but where you're living as well? That must have been quite a difficult thing to adapt to.
So there is an understanding that we need to meet in the middle, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But in terms of myself, yes, for sure. Over the years of living in Asia and Southeast Asia, you do develop an understanding of the different nuances from different cultures, such as different norms around communication, for example, like how straight talking you can be, or different cultures are, all the way from a Scandinavian that will tell you something exactly like it is, to someone from an Asian culture that wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable telling a superior something so directly because of cultural norms. So yeah, you do kind of learn the ropes in that respect.
But that's obviously that would develop you as a person as well. Like I think, even from my small experience of living in Spain when I was younger and in the States for a while, or traveling there fairly extensively, I think you do become a little bit more open-minded. You go, all right, you have to work out how you even communicate in different ways with people. You can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach to your communication even. I think you have to adapt slightly. And
for sure.
Be aware.
Yeah, you can't approach stuff with what I would call like a sledgehammer approach. You do need to take a step back and think, what's the most culturally sensitive way to approach this.
Definitely. So moving on to a slightly different topic. So we're both obviously lovers of EPI and we really connect with it. So I'd like to sort of hear from your perspective, how would you kind of, to someone who maybe hasn't seen what the EPI approach is, that's extensive processing instruction, how would you sort of define that in your own words, what it's all about?
Well, to summarize EPI essentially at its essence, it's an input to output framework, basically going from modeling to spontaneity. So modeling core chunks all the way to students being able to produce those chunks spontaneously, naturally. But within that, the actual chunks themselves are really important because we're looking at chunks that have got as high frequency as possible, chunks that have got really high surrender value, which then students can use to patch together to then to eventually create authentic language that's useful in the real world.
No, that's perfect. I completely agree. It's I think the key thing about it is actually giving the opportunity to get to spontaneity. Whereas that's what I found, a lot of methods and stuff like that, they either skipped the stages to get there, so they were never going to get there, or it didn't really give the opportunity or time or the appropriate stages to actually get there. So I find that's what kind of really works well, is how it's chunked down. Those stages they're so clear, and I started talking to my students a bit more about, in terms of the metacognition, how they're learning, and they kind of get it more. It's kind of, that's how you communicate with someone, like even down to your receptive processing. That's what you do initially or even your even prior to that, is kind of just being sensitized to the words that are being said to you. Then it's kind of processing those words, then you're translating them into your own language, then you're coming up with it in your own language, translating it to your target language. That is the process that happens in your brain. And it just makes so much sense. And when you actually put it across to students, even at the start of each stage, you go, this is why we're doing this. This is what happens in your brain at this stage when you're trying to, either receive the language or produce it. They actually get it more. So it's like if you can actually explain that to students, well, they're going to learn. Again, it comes back to the thing of the why. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this task? And they're going to learn better with that.
Yeah, of course. Well, we've got in our classrooms, we've got Mars ears as one of our main displays, and then students can see them modeling awareness raising and so on. And periodically we'll say, okay, guys, where in the sequence do you think we are now? And they'll point, okay, this is structured production. Or if we get to like the end of a sequence and we're looking at a marketplace, for example, say, okay, this one is, we're looking at spontaneity, fluency and spontaneity. And then if we look at, that's kind of the end goal. And then when we're discussing what the task is, say if the task is fluency, then what do we really want to be able to do? How do we get there? And we kind of like writing a long paragraph and then reading that paragraph out. Does that, is that spontaneity? And they're like, no, not really. So yeah, no, for sure, getting the students to understand the Marziers framework and then their party to the learning, it's very, very empowering.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there are misconceptions around it. Have you found when you've had to sort of talk to people about it, have you found certain people have had certain preconceived ideas about EPI that are maybe incorrect?
Yes, I have seen that. Often the main misconceptions that I've come across, one of them is people say that EPI is just sentence builders and it's just the rote learning of chunks. They're just learning chunks off by heart. So, they're not really understanding that we are learning really high surrender value chunks, which we're working towards automatizing so students can patch them together to create spontaneous language. They think they're just learning chunks out of context. One other thing which some detractors say is that there's not, they say there's no grammar in EPI, which again, it's a shame. All of these, I'd say, criticisms of EPI come from a misunderstanding of what EPI is. So in terms of there not being explicit grammar is explicitly mentioned in Mars ears. So in the expansion phase, that's the time to then explicitly kind of lock in and look at the grammar, unpick the grammar. The only difference is that grammar is studied in context, and also once students have automatized key chunks and key structures, then we can say, okay, so why, what exactly are we doing? And we can unpick that grammar, as opposed to, I'd say, previous systems that teach grammar as isolated rules and then expect students to apply isolated rules within just a few hundred milliseconds, which is as long as we have to remember the vocab, remember the structures, remember the what is the verb, how do I conjugate it, how do I pronounce this word, and how do I apply the grammar rule, all within Gianfranco often quotes 300 milliseconds.
How do I conjugate this verb?
You have that long to get all of this done. So with EPI, if you've at least automatized what it is, the key structures, and then you can say, okay, this is actually the preterite, or this is the imperfect. It's a much better time to do it in context, as opposed to teaching the imperfect and then a student knowing, okay, I know what the imperfect is, but I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it just makes so much more sense. But also saying about the explicit grammar teaching, some of coming around to a different element of what you do, which is a major thing, is your books. So one of your latest ones is on how to teach grammar in that way, this sort of put it in a natural way, I suppose, in a communicative way as well. So talk to me about the books a bit more, because I mean, obviously I've had involvement in them. I'm very passionate about them, as people probably seen.
Yeah, no, for sure. You've been unbelievably supportive of the books in in many ways. So thank you
No, no,
for
it's
that, Ben.
cool. I
That's
love it. I love it.
really really appreciate it. In fact, you're literally even almost as we speak, you're involved in
That's
proofreading
right.
a
That's right. It's gonna
latest
be the next thing I
edition.
do.
So um, the books the books date back to, well, to start the story at the beginning. So after working with Jan for a few years and really getting into EPI myself, I started to do some blogging. So I was doing some blogging back in 2019, and I was together with Jan. We were writing blogs together, and we wrote a few blogs just really explaining what I recall the major failings, in our opinion, of the mainstream textbooks. And the posts that we were writing, which kind of showed our application of EPI, and also kind of the some of the problems that we were finding with the textbooks, such as kind of shallow coverage of topics or jumping from one topic to the next, but also the lack of comprehensible input. The lack of thought put into comprehensible input, and also the fact that the content wasn't presented in sentence builders. The language typically is presented at the end of the units in a glossary, in a single word glossary. So it really kind of went against the way we thought that language needed to be taught, and obviously goes against the way that what the science tells us about how language is learned. So we were writing these blogs, and the blogs were getting a lot of hits, and the stuff that we were writing was really resonating with quite an audience of people. But the common trend that was coming up was, we agree, we also find that we have these issues. We also will play a listening, and we'll get groans from the kids, and we'll have kids shouting out mid listening, "I don't get it," or "Play it again, I can't do it." So we had people were kind of saying that they agreed with what we were saying, and that they were having the same issues, but at the same time there just physically wasn't time for people to make, obviously, their own, too many of their own resources. So obviously Jan was making his own resources and providing those, or selling them or providing them for free. I think he got over 2 million downloads on Tez, and he was the Tez biggest contributor of the year a few years ago. But people were saying, we agree, but we don't have any alternative. There's nothing else that we can do, because we don't have time to make our own book, and this is the only book available. So while we agree, we kind of don't have any alternative. So that kind of stuck with me. Also, I was thinking, I wish there was an alternative. So over the years between 2017 2019, I fully EPI'd my curriculum together with Jan. So we did it together in the early days before he started touring internationally. So we rewrote the curriculum, and I personally made sentence builders at first for one or two topics, but over a couple of years, I actually had sentence builders for every single topic that I was teaching from year 7 to year 11. I had sentence builders across all the topics, and then I had EPI resources for all the topics. And it was in the about January 2020 that we went into a really strong lockdown, a really say a harsh, a really severe lockdown, especially due to COVID, especially here in Malaysia. Malaysia, we had one of the most strict lockdowns out there, with the exception of perhaps China. So we weren't allowed to leave the house at all, apart from going to hospital or the supermarket. That was the only excuse for leaving the house. And there was army tanks, actually not army tanks, but they had army 4x4s and the army like roadblocks, just monitoring where people were going. So you really couldn't leave the house. And I remember it actually one day I was trying to get fit, and I thought I'm going to do the Mount Everest challenge, which involves running up and down the steps in your house. You calculate how many steps you have, divide it by however many, and you work out that if you climb up and down the steps only like 60,000 times, you will have climbed Mount Everest. And I remember making it up and down the stairs about maybe 4 times before I had one kid holding onto my leg. I was pulling a kid, and I thought, okay, if I carry a kid up and down the stairs, then that maybe counts for 2 flights each time. But yeah, and then within 6 flights, that the other kid was crying, complaining, "Why aren't you carrying me as well?" And I just thought, you know what, I can't do that. So I need something, I need something to focus on. And that's when I thought So I rang up Gianfranco. This was on midday that day. He was actually stuck in the UK. He got stuck in the UK at this same time because he was, I think, doing on the tail end of a tour or something, and he couldn't fly back because obviously the whole world locked down, as you'll remember. So he was stuck in the UK. I was in Malaysia. I said, let's do it. I said, let's write a book. Let's put the sentence builders together and make a book. And that kind of led to the creation of the first ever sentence builders book. So we worked like mad. We were so impassioned by the project that we would just work. I was still obviously teaching full time, but I'd get up a couple of hours early before the day started and do some work, and then once the school day finished, I would then work into the night on my sections, and whenever I went to sleep, then Gianfranco would wake up in the UK and he'd work throughout the day. And we just worked like 24 hours a day for about 3 months to create the first sentence builders book. And that was the start. That was the start of it all. So we made this book. It was very well received. And then people obviously started using it and called out they wanted the sequel. We made the intermediate book. Then together with Simona and Stefano, we made the primary versions. And yes, it was the start of a big movement, the sentence builder book movement.
Yes, and how it's evolved from there is being dramatic. I remember getting those books because that was around the time, that was, I think, in only my second year of teaching or something like that. And I remember getting those books. I think I got them for Christmas or something. But and thinking, all right, this is something very fresh and very new. And yeah, that sort of sparked my interest, and then I got involved in the course and went on the becoming an EPI teacher and all that stuff, and it kind of went from there really. But yeah, I remember getting those. It was the beginner improver, then intermediate advanced book, wasn't it, or something around that way. But yeah, I remember getting those and how effective they were, and how it's escalated from there, how it's evolved.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of the evolution, so we made those books, and I've been using them. I use them since day one. So I've been, if you want, I wouldn't say trialing them because it sounds like I'm experimenting with my own students, but I've been using them. I created them with a view to using them in my own classroom with my own students. So I used them extensively with my students for about 2 to 3 years is how long we used the beginner book and the intermediate book. And as a result of using it, I became aware of they were working very well, and we're getting great results, big GCSE intakes, and was it last year? Last year we had very strong results. The year before, with a class of mine that had done sentence builder books and EPI from year 5 up to year 11, a class of mine 2 years ago, they got the highest value added in the school and also the top grades in the school. So practically all A stars and 1A. So they were the highest achieving class in the school. And this is a class, raised on a diet only of EPI. And like I say, highest value added and also best results. And for a lot of the students, looking at their at their different grades across different subjects. Often Spanish would be their highest mark across all of their grades. So that's to say that the books do work really well in conjunction with EPI, but at the same time, looking at it through a critical lens, I was always looking at things that didn't work as well as they could, or things that could be improved. So we decided to make the trilogy series, and the trilogy series, the main difference is that obviously there's 3 books, as opposed to 2, hence the trilogy. So there's a trilogy 1 for year 7, then trilogy 2 for year 8, and trilogy 3 for year 9. And that's obviously really helpful in terms of mapping a course out. You've got 1 per year group, as opposed to the previous ones where we had 2 across 3 year groups, which immediately causes problems. Also, with the trilogy, there's integrated listening. So the start of every unit starts with listening and then goes on to vocab building. I've actually started doing some of the vocab building first and then going back to the listening, or just interspersing listening across several lessons. I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing the entire listening section before moving on. But yeah, so the books have got a variety of different skills, as opposed to the trilogy books have got a variety of different skills as opposed to the original one. And then the latest development was creating a accompanying speaking book, which obviously you're very familiar with because you're the creator of 2 of the speaking books for the Spanish trilogy. Stuff like Fast and Furious, just to often I play it with my groups, and I'll record myself going not too fast, but just to give them a baseline. No, often I'll do a Fast and Furious. I'll get them to play for a few minutes. Fast and Furious, for anyone listening that's not familiar, it's a game where students need to either translate a number of sentences into target language, or it could be also a gapped translation. So it could be en mi tiempo libre me gusta something al fútbol, en mi tiempo libre me gusta something natación, and then they have to either fill in, me gusta or hacer on the chunk. They have to fill in the missing chunk. So students will play this for a while, then I'll model how it could go quickly, and then students are encouraged to go even faster. And it's just almost practically zero prep, only 1 or 2 minutes of prep. Just prep 10 target chunks, and then the fact that the students have that competition to say it faster and faster just creates competition, and it builds that confidence.
And ultimately, we all like games. I think that some teachers shy away from games in the classroom, and realistically, especially boys, you could say, maybe, and girls the same. I really like competition.
I think
we like to see success in something. We like to compete. We like to feel like we're achieving something, and sometimes it's almost in the nicest way possible. It's almost tricking them into learning the language.
Yeah, it is, but it is tricking them into learning the language, but also it's just giving them some kind of motivation, and it's a motivation ultimately just to beat their own time. So it just adds an element of fun, an element of competition. Just something as simple as, if I say to you, read out these 10 sentences, you'll read them out, but there won't be any real excitement to it. But if I say, okay, now time yourself reading out these 10 sentences, and now see if you can do it again and beat your time, then you've got an additional focus, and it just becomes exciting just by that challenge.
Yeah, exactly. It's adding that element of challenge to it and making it. Again, it's coming back to that reason for doing it. What's my reason for learning a language? What's my reason for doing this activity? And that's what it is, isn't it? It's giving them that purpose.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, so in terms of your projects coming up, apart from, like you're saying, you're extending the primary offering, is there anything else that's that we should be looking out for?
There's the one that we mentioned at the very beginning is the GCSE Foundation Grammar book for French that just came out, and in a way the title Foundation is marginally misleading. I'm using elements of it with my year 11 class, and definitely top end higher students, and I'm using some of the foundation items with them. Like just last week, I had a student who had written alguno when it should really no, she'd written algún, but it should have been alguno, and she said, "What's the difference?" And so I started to think, well, actually, I could explain it, and then I thought, oh, crap, I wrote I wrote 2 pages about this. I've already got an explanation and exercises that go with it. So I just printed her out the section from the book about algún, ningún, and the different permutations
Definitely.
of those.
I mean, even based on that, like you're saying, in terms of kind of like the teaching kind of adaptively and going, right, this is what's needed now. Even yesterday with my year 11s, I was in intervention and I saw they were struggling with the conditional tense. So I pulled a couple of the pages from the new GCSE book, and worked on that conditional tense and how, because it's got really clear explanations of how, and then it goes through how to identify, how to embed it, then translating, and so it goes through that same process, but it gives those opportunities to, sometimes you do need to embed certain tenses with your GCSE students, but
No, for sure. And we're following Mars ears throughout our own books. We're kind of practicing what we preach, and that we're modeling what needs to be done. We're raising awareness of what it looks like, and we're working towards being able to produce the language. And it's done in a way where it's not rushed. And the way I know that is that by the end of a unit of work, students are confident in translating quite independently, and there's not so much mystery or translating stuff just based on kind of muscle memory of I've memorized something but I don't know what I'm doing. There's a deeper understanding. I was going to say, Ben, another thing that I think would be really good to develop that we're also looking at is a second listening book. So we made the GCSE listening book, which I'm sure you must have also been involved in.
Yeah.
I feel like you're involved in every project. And that book as well has been just really, really interesting using it. I remember, obviously, I made it with Jan and with Ronan. And then when I actually used it in class, then I realized, wow, this actually is really, really useful. And it puts into practice, one of the things that we always say, which
Absolutely.
is about using listening as a way to teach the language, as opposed to as a way to test students. And that's why the listening books as well, they go from modeling the language, getting students, priming students in terms of the key language that they're going to need to tackle the text, and just building up a really in-depth phonological awareness, like a lexico-phonological awareness, which means that they can then tackle the text, but also having that conversation with the students about how if we do this, then we're kind of strengthening our listening skills, and we're strengthening our ability to hear text, but to be able to work out without kind of panicking, or like if a student is unfamiliar with a word, if a student sees the word hospital or hospital, they're going to see it and think, okay, I know what that means. But if they hear it quickly without being familiar with the context, then they could easily miss what it means. So with the listening books, just by strengthening those skills, it's just really empowering students to be able to listen and work things out in less of a survival listening kind of mode.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and also from the basic perspective that students often struggle with listening when it comes to exams. That's quite often the element that they struggle with, and it could quite possibly be as simple as it's down to the resources that are being used to teach from. Like, teachers always struggle to find resources that are relevant to listening. It's not that there aren't loads out there.
It's hard.
They're trying to drag from past papers and blah 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 from different random resources, but it gives a whole set of excellent resources that are again pre-made, ready to go, completely relevant.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, totally agree with all that you say. And one thing which is funny, a funny anecdote. I don't know if Gianfranco mentions this himself, but I do recall one year working with him where his students got out of all of the this is the very very early days, like days so early that pre EPI. There's one day that Gianfranco was saying, Dylan, should we call, should we? I'm not sure whether to call it EPI or DPI. So it was in between EPI for extensive and
Right,
DPI for deep processing
right.
instruction. So it's really funny. Like in a different multiverse, we could all
Yeah.
be talking about DPI.
DPI.
And so in these early days, before EPI had been even formally named, there's one time that in the mocks, his French class, there was a few different GCSE French classes, and his French classes actually got the highest score out of all the other classes, and
There you
he'd
go.
only done one past paper prior to that, just so that they knew the format of the exam. He'd done one past paper, and the rest of it had just been
Yeah.
raising phonological awareness, learning how to listen, and doing all of the
Mm,
different
mm,
EPI listening activities, narrow listenings, and so on.
yeah.
So he'd built up their capacity to listen and understand without actually doing any past papers, and obviously without using any mainstream textbook. Gianfranco, I think,
There you go.
never
Yeah, it's
touched one of those in the time that I knew him. He always had his own
yeah.
resources.
No, I think and also it's that I think the thing you said about we said previously about the about EPI and having a consistency of it. I think it's great. You can absolutely introduce it at the different year groups and stuff. But the biggest impact I noticed was when in my previous school was when they had actually used it from year 7 or from year 8 even all the way through using that using using that methodology, and ultimately it was in the year I left actually. Ironically, as in the last set of results I got I didn't get the results, the students got them. The last set of results the students got were the best of the best in the school. They were absolutely outstanding, and they had spent that time using that methodology, and it speaks for itself. The students were confident. They were confident in all elements, and that was it. That was it really. And I think having that consistency across the whole thing, it genuinely works. I think if you chop and change and all that stuff, it's everybody's entitled to have their own methods and their own way of doing things. But for me, that really worked well
Yeah, no, for sure.
with that
I'd say
group.
that as well. Like, if anyone's listening and thinking, well, I get great results and I don't use EPI, then fair enough. I'm not out to make everyone turn to EPI, and I'm not really here to criticize the other methods as well. The only thing that I do say that I stand by is any method that people do use needs to respect the basic principles of neuroscience. If people have found their own, if they have a different way that to teach students that also promotes self-efficacy, that helps students build their confidence while respecting the basic principles of cognitive load theory and not doing anything that goes wildly against up-to-date research on language acquisition, such as learning single words out of context, then that's great. It's great by me. I'm not saying that EPI is the only way, or what I would say is that it's a way that is definitely proven to work, and um, the proof that it does work is just the fact that it's so widely adopted across the world, and the fact that it's adopted even at bearing in mind that when Gianfranco started out, he had been. I would say it's fair to say he'd been rejected by some of the major figures in the MFL community. So he was a bit of a black sheep, and he just traveled around the world without any support, apart from obviously myself and a few other friends. But he, without any institutional support, he just traveled around the world with just himself and a briefcase and a pen drive doing his presentations, and he's managed to create such a following, and it must be because it really works. Otherwise, if people tried it and it didn't work, then it would have died out. It would have died out so quick that we wouldn't even have
Or it would
made
have been like a
book.
fad, or
But
it would have been
instead,
something that, yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But instead, it's just proven to be so successful that it's been adopted across whole states. That the whole state of Victoria in Australia, like officially, it's an EPI state. There's one small European country whose government has reached out to Jan, talking about making it the official methodology, across the whole country, and it's used across a very large number of schools with thousands of teachers. So it definitely is a good system.
And even the data that came out, I can't remember off the top of my head the figures, but the percentage of schools that have come out to say they're using it either partially or fully as a method within their school. It was a good one.
Yes,
I wish I knew.
I don't have the figure either, but I know that it was a big chunk. I can't remember if it was over 50% or not, but it was definitely. In any case, it was a larger chunk of schools than what it was previously, which again is just evidence of increased uptake.
Yeah, it's up to the top people who are making the decisions and stuff to wake up to that. I think, like you said, it hasn't been supported by any particular institution previously, and it should be picked up even more. But it's gaining momentum. So
yeah, for sure. I think it would be good if more schools adopted it. I guess. Like I say, for me, it's not so much about EPI. It's just about using a system that makes sense, that makes sense in terms of language acquisition research.
From a different perspective, I've seen some of your footage of you doing music with students and things like that in your class. You play ukulele as well, which is very cool. How do you? Obviously, that they are certain ways that you keep lessons feeling fresh. Are there any other ways that you keep it feeling fresh and exciting for students? They're a bit out there.
I think, there's a couple of things. One thing for sure is music. At the end of a class, for the last 10 minutes, then I'll get the students all together, and for 10 minutes we'll all sing the song together. And it's just a way of kind of creating community, everyone singing together, and I like to try and layer it up. So we'll start by just learning how to sing the song. Yeah. Obviously, students will discuss what the lyrics mean and so on, but then just finding exciting ways to just creating opportunities, or finding exciting ways to make it exciting for the kids. So what I did previously, for example, is a couple of years ago I taught all of Year 6 Spanish a song called Las Abejitas, which is a song obviously about bees, and which is actually an original song written by a couple of friends of the other Spanish teacher working in my department, Paloma Lozano. And then I thought it would be funny if we invited the Year 6s to dress up as bees and then perform the song in assembly, just in a primary assembly. So we taught this song to Year 6 called Las Abejitas, and it's just started out as it would be fun to teach Year 6 this original song. Yeah. And then we taught them it, and they sang it really nicely, and we thought, they sing it really nicely. Wouldn't it be funny? What can we do more? So then So I said, do you guys want to dress up as bees? And they're like, hell yeah, we want to dress up as bees. So they got these bee outfits, and then they sang it in an assembly, and that went really well. And then a few weeks later, we'd planned an AIMS, a association of international schools in Malaysia. So this big conference with multiple schools all coming, and we were asked to be the opening act.
Oh
so
my
we
gosh.
were the opening act for this big languages conference.
Wow. Oh, that's
like
going global.
yeah. This packed hall, with a 1,000 teachers, stroke students, and my year sixes, or our year sixes, because it was a combined two or three classes, all dressed as bees singing this song. So it's just an example of keeping things fresh.
Yeah.
Yes, on the one hand, we're doing Mars ears, we're doing EPI, we're learning the chunks, and then using those prefabricated units of language to create spontaneous speech. But at the same time, we're also doing dumb stuff.
But you're bringing it to life. You're giving it
memories.
energy, and you're remembering their kids in front of you as well.
For
you know
sure.
what I mean?
And those kids will never forget the time they dressed up as bees.
Exactly.
And one girl actually who I still teach, that was 2 years ago, and this girl came back. She told me after summer, she came to see me super excited and said, "Sir, you'll never guess what happened." She's now in year 8. She said, "You never guess." I'm like, "What happened?" She's like, I was in Spain. My parents took me to Spain. I'm like, yeah, and we went to this farm. I'm like, and I met a Spanish beekeeper. And I'm like, yeah, and she like, and I told him, I told him something about, sin las abejas todo esto no existiría, and she like threw in like a few different quotes from the song.
Wow.
And she had a conversation with the Spanish beekeeper.
There you go.
And so it's just kind of like
you never know. You never know where it's going to come in. And it's like that's one of the things teaching these kids about, like the reason for learning languages and the relationships you can build through it. And it's that the closeness of like random conversations, having random relationships between people, friendships that you can build through it that would just never have happened had you not had those skills.
Yeah, no, for sure. She would never have had a conversation with a beekeeper.
Yeah.
That's almost for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I would say that's my main answer for keeping stuff fresh.
Yeah.
Is just throwing in songs, but also
Love it.
Trying to diversify away from the sentence builders, because like we said at the very beginning, people say some people say that EPI is very sentence builder heavy, and therefore it's kind of limiting in the language. But doing investigating like language, like idioms, investigating idioms. Like we did a lesson. I did a lesson with my year 9s prior to them having to do a writing about past holidays.
Yeah.
And we explored the different idioms to say how hot it is. And this is on the language gym. So on the language gym, if you search up hot, you'll find idioms for saying how hot it is.
Yeah.
And these students, apart from saying, pues, durante las vacaciones fui aquí, hice this, hice that, they also say, un día hizo muchísimo calor. And one of my students wrote, hacía un calor que caían los patos asados. And so they have another one wrote, hacía un calor que hacía tanto calor que hasta las ranas iban con cantimplora.
Gosh.
So you have this like super random vocab, but if each student learns, and I encouraged each student to just pick out which is the idiom for saying how hot it was, the one that resonated the most with them. So they only had to really internalize one main idiom, and they all took hacía un calor de mil demonios. Everyone took one or two idioms and put it into their work. So that's also cool. A way to keep things fresh.
Yeah. Make them use interesting language and get them to really think about. It's expanding their own vocabulary as well. In their own
for sure.
Thinking about how they're speaking. But So one last thing. What would you say is one teaching kind of challenge that has really helped shape the way you are as a teacher today? What has been the main thing that has shaped you as a teacher?
one teaching challenge I find is if you have a curriculum that's not like fully backwards by design, where you haven't fully mapped out exactly where students need to go and mapped out a path where they need to go. And where they need to go, I mean what they need to know by the end of year 9 or by GCSE. If you haven't mapped out that path and then included the systematic recycling and the interleaving, and if you don't have a clear curriculum map, then no matter how kind of engaging you are as a teacher, no matter how good your resources are, you're still up against it, trying to make the best progress. To be honest, Ben, teaching hasn't been very challenging for the last quite a few years. You know, ever since I met Gianfranco and developed a good understanding of how EPI works, and kind of worked with him, learnt from him, and became, uh, more than familiar with Mars ears, then life straight away got a lot easier. It was still challenging organizing resources, and in the first couple of years of becoming a EPI teacher, I had ditched the textbook that we were using, and that first year, Veronica Palacin, who is now head of Spanish at our local main competitor. Um, so Veronica Palacin joined me, and we had no resources. So it was a challenge having no resources at all for the first couple of years. So every week we were basically making all of the resources from scratch for everything, all of the Key Stage 3 resources, from delayed dictations to pyramid translations, narrow readings, the works, everything we made from scratch. So that was a lot. That was a lot. Whereas now, my students have got trilogy books. I dip in and out of the grammar books for a bit of extension, either for the expansion phase, or also you can also dip into the grammar books just if you have particularly strong students that you need to stretch. You can give them the more advanced stuff from those. So by having languagegym.com and sentencebuilders.com subscriptions and the whole trilogy set and a full understanding of Mars ears, it definitely, sometimes I feel guilty. Sometimes I feel guilty that I don't need to create so many resources because all the resources are there already. And then I remember that I actually worked around the clock for 5 years to help make them, together with obviously a team of people. And then I feel a bit less guilty.
You've already done that. Exactly that, and that's something that I would say I found interesting coming into a new school. I started here last year, and they weren't a school using this method, and I kind of brought it in and suggested that we take it on, and it was so seamless and so straightforward to actually do it. In a way, there are obviously challenges, but because of all the resources available, it covers everything. So to implement it and bring it into a school, that's the difference now. It's kind of like, yeah, you do feel slightly guilty. It's all available. Like, all the stuff's there, all ready to go. But the work has already gone into it, whether it's by me or by the team or by someone else. It doesn't matter. If it's relevant and it's good, you use it. So that's the problem. Before, maybe it wasn't relevant or strong enough. Now, what's available, it makes it so you can, you still take parts of the different books, or you still build it yourself. But ultimately, there's such a wide variety of things you can use to achieve each stage, and I think that's why now here they absolutely love it. The students are really engaged, the teachers are really on board with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like on that topic, I would say, yes, if you have the trilogy books, if you have sentencebuilders.com or a language gym subscription, then you pretty much have everything you need. You don't need to do any particularly heavy lifting. It's all there for you. But at the same time, I would really, if I had one bit of advice, it would be to not how can I say, not over rely on the books, but to not forget about putting in your own personal touch. So like in my case, making sure that music is still a big part of my lessons, whatever it is that as a teacher you're passionate about.
Like I love coming up with new games. I try, and you've probably seen the
Glad, your new games are fantastic. I did one. There's one that you inspired me. It was to do. They had to write a whole bunch of post-it translations and then
post-it locura, maybe. I don't know.
Tremendo, man, tremendo. I love that game. We did post-it locura. I did it with my. It was last year with my year 11, so my year 10s last year, and they absolutely loved it. They said, when can we do it again? This has been like our best lesson for ages. So for sure. So just bringing that creativity.
Exactly. I tell you what, you've got to try Slam Dunk. That's the one that they all talk about now. They just ask me every single time. I'm like, no, that doesn't come at this part of the sequence.
Hey, Gil, when I'm going to read about Slam Dunk, and I'll bring that in as well.
Yeah. No,
for sure.
Nice, that's great, mate. Well, it must be really late there. But
it's getting late.
It's getting late, but I must say thank you so much for your time. And it's been such a pleasure to talk to you about a variety of things, and inspiring to hear about your journey. It's very, very different to the standard pathway into teaching, which is what makes you the teacher you are. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you so much for giving myself and others a platform to kind of tell our story and to talk about why we're passionate about language teaching, and to kind of give our own take on it. So thank you very much for that, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Dylan.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Language Sofa podcast. Thank you so much, Dylan, for your time and for such a great conversation. We look forward to seeing you all next time.